Okay, and welcome back to another Random Bits. This one we're going to finish off, hopefully, the light cycles game that I started in the last Random Bits. So if you recall, we were using PICO-8 to create a little Tron-like light cycles game, and we had got as far as having a bike that we could drive around on the screen, looking something like this, where we could drive left and right. Okay, so for the next little bit we want to do is actually be able to crash into things. However, if we do crash into anything, we need the game to actually change screens or play a game over message or whatever. So really we need to tweak the update and the draw functions to have a different kind of game state. Now, we actually probably want a start menu, the actual game, and the end menu, or the game over screen. And one way of doing that is to have a state variable, and then have some if statements in the update and the draw methods to say, you know, if we're at the game, is the title screen, do this. If we're in the game, do this. And if we're at the game over screen, do something else. But since we're using Lua, we can actually do something a little cleverer. So in Lua, functions are first-class objects. So what we can do is we can actually have a variable called screen, and into there we are going to set up two functions, and then we're going to call the functions instead. And then by changing the variables, the functions that the variables point at, we'll be able to easily toggle which update method and which draw method gets called. So to do this, we are going to do the following. So in our init method, we are going to call a function called show menu, and in show menu, which is going to be the title page of the game, what we're going to do is we're going to set up two variables, and we're going to point them at some functions. So we're going to have the screen update function and the screen draw variable, and we're going to point those at update game and draw, rather update menu and draw menu. And then we're going to actually do the drawing. So firstly, we're going to take our existing update method, and we're going to call that, rename that to update game, and we're going to do the same thing for our draw method. We're going to call that draw game, and we're going to create a new update method, which is going to do screen.update. We'll call the screen.update function, or the function that the screen.update variable is pointing at. And we're going to do the same thing for the draw method as well. So this is going to call screen.draw. Cool. So our show menu function is calling update menu, and is going to set it up to call update menu and draw menu. So let's actually create those functions. So we're going to do a update menu function, and to start with, we're just going to say we're just going to print some text on the screen. Something like that, and we'll draw it roughly centered on the screen, and I'll draw it in white. actually, what we're going to do, function draw menu. We're actually going to put the print statement into the draw function, and in the update menu we're going to say if button 4, which is the Z key, then we want to call the start game function end. Alright, and then for our start game function, or rather let's call that something more interesting like run game. We will set up our game. So firstly, the first thing we want to do is update these two variables to point to the game, the update game function and the draw game functions. And we probably also want to take all this initialization stuff that we had up here, rather these ones, and we'll put it in there, and we'll add the screen clearing function into there so that it starts with a blank screen before in the update. Okay, let's give that a run. So we've got press Z to start, and then we can start and we can drive around. Excellent. So more or less back where we were. We're just going to do show menu. Let's trigger a screen clear over here as well. Alright, so we run that, press C to start, drive around, and off we go. Excellent stuff. So the other function that we need, so we've got the main menu, we've got the actual game itself, we can start the game, we can run the updates for the game. So what we need now is the functions to handle the game over screens. So in a similar fashion, we're going to create a game over function. We're going to call it show game over, and once again we're going to update those variables over there, and we're going to do an update game over and a draw game over. And for the moment, we will just copy that behavior down over here and rename this update game over and draw. And we're just going to say game over for that one, and if we press the Z key, then we want to start back at the menu, so we want to show menu all over again. So let's go back to that, and so instead of run game, we want to show menu. Alright, and then the last thing we need to do is actually do the bit of code that lets us crash into things. And the way we're going to do that is using the command that lets us look at the pixel on the screen. So we were using pset before to set the value of a pixel on the screen. Now we want to use the pget command and look at player 1 position and their x and y coordinates, and we want to say if that doesn't equal to 0, a black pixel, then we want to show game over. Alright, let's give that a run. Z to start, and hopefully I should now be able to crash into myself. It says game over, and I can press Z, and it's got there again. Excellent. So once again, a couple of things there. Firstly, this should be button P, so that it waits for the button to go up and all the way down, and the same thing for checking whether we press the key at the start of the screen. Alright, now the other things we want to do is gives ourselves some things to crash into. So the easiest thing to do is within the main game, update menu, run game, is to do some things here. So firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to draw ourselves a box on the screen, or a rectangle on the screen, to put like a border around the screen. So we're going to go from 0, 0, which is the top left corner, to 127, 127, which is the bottom right corner, and we're going to do that in color 1, which is a dark blue. Oops, let's try that again, and press Z to start, and now we have a border that we can crash into. Press C, and we're back again. Excellent. All right. Cool. So this game's all good, except we only have a single player on the screen. So what we really want to do is add a second player and a second set of keys. So to do that, we can create a second player at the top here, and we can initialize that player's data when we start the game up, so that they started somewhere useful on the screen. And we probably need to adjust where they start. So currently it starts in the middle of the screen, so we're just going to start the one player slightly to the one side, and the other player to the other side of the screen, slightly to the side of the center of the screen. And we set up the X and Y and their initial direction to both be going up. Okay. Now when we get to this bit here, we could duplicate all of this code, but that would be a bit messy. So instead what we can do is we can create ourselves a new function, and have the function have all the logic in there, and then we can pass in the particular piece of data we want, the player table that we want. So if we have a new function called update player, and we're going to pass in the player that we want to do the update on, what we can do is we can grab all of this data and grab that out and put that into here, and rename all of this from P1 to player, and same over here. Oops. over here. This is kind of where search and replace would be handy. Okay, so we've updated those, so that handles the movement of their X and Y based on direction. And we're going to do the same thing here for reading the keys to change the direction. And we're checking the wraparound when they rotate all the way around, same thing. And then lastly, for actually drawing the player, or rather checking the location of the player to see whether it's run into anything. All right. And then we've go down to the back to the update game. This now just simply becomes update player passing in P1. Right, let's check if that works without breaking anything. We can still drive around and we can still crash into things. So that's working. Right, so now if we update player 2 as well. And then in the draw game loop, we need to actually draw player 2. So we're going to do player 2.x, player 2.y, and we're going to draw it in some kind of color. I think we're going to go for 14, which is a pink. And we can run this. Now we have two lines, but when we press the key, they both respond into the same key press, which is not really what we want. So that'll be because over here we're looking for button 0 and button 1, and the default here is for the first player. So we actually want to change this to either be the first or the second player. So the way to do that is to pass in a player number, and then we can check the button for player, player num, and player num. And then we go back down to the update here. I'm going to pass in 0 for the first player and 1 for the next player, which means I can now use the cursor keys for player 1, and I can use the S and F keys for player 2. So if we run that now, S and F does its thing, and then I managed to drive into myself. So try that again. Try drive double-handed without crashing into things. Yep, so that's all working. Excellent. Let's just save that. All right. Cool. So we can now drive around and we can crash into things. Let's add some sound effects. Okay. So the first sound effect we kind of want like a motorbike driving noise or a light cycle driving noise. So what we can do is we go to there and we'll create a sound effect, and we'll use something like this one. Oh, maybe this one. No, maybe this one. No, gotta find the right one. That one. How about this one? Yes. So that is a kind of a thing, but we kind of want it to repeat. So what we can actually do is we can tell it to loop at that point there. So if we play now, it's just going to do this kind of droning noise, which I think will do nicely. So going back to our code, pretty much once we start the game, loop up, what we can now do is use the sfx command to play our sound, and our sound is in slot 0. So we've got a number of different channels to play the sounds on, and so what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to play sound number 0 in slot 0, and let's have a look how that goes. So if we run now and we start the game, and there it goes, except we don't stop the sound. So what we need to do is when we crash the game, or rather when we crash a bike down in the show game over, what we want to do there is stop the sound effect, and we can do that by using the fsx command. We can do -1, which means no sound, again on channel 0, and off we go. And I'm just going to check what the last parameter was, just to remind myself. Oh yes, that 0 there is the offset, so you can play further into the sound if you wanted to, or not. Alright, so let's give that a try. And press C, and if I crash, the sound now stops. Okay, so that gives us a nice little drony noise. Now what we probably want to do is add a noise that we can play when we or when a player changes direction. So let's see what we can do there. So let's first create ourselves the sound. So back to the sounds. Now we'll go to the next slot, and we want to create a sound, kind of a turning noise. So let's see, we can probably use the same type of envelope and make a sound that's kind of a up and down. And that's very slow because it's at speed 16, so we can reduce the speed. I think that'll work. Alright, and maybe increase that sound a bit. Nah, there we are, that'll do. So sample number 1. So going back to our code, we pretty much need to, when the player changes direction, we need to, as a result of one of these button presses over here, then we need to, or we want to play the sound. So the easiest way is to create a local variable. We're going to call it last dir, and we're going to set it equal to the player's direction before we start checking for updates. We're then going to go through the whole process of changing their direction and then checking their checking the button presses, then checking the direction hasn't wrapped around, and then finally we're going to add a new if statement here that says if player.dir does not equal last dir, their last direction, then we know that they have changed direction. And we're going to do this on a different channel so that it doesn't interrupt the droning noise. So we're going to play sound effect number 1, and we're going to play it on channel number 1, starting at the main position, and we're going to end that there. Okay, and let's just tidy up this code here, and then we'll do the hit check over there. So if we run that now, we get a cool driving around noise. All right. So what we should also probably do is create some kind of sound effect for when the player crashes and dies. So let's have a look. We go to the sound effects and we go to sound effect number 2. And I think we can use something like this, and we'll just do something like this. Right. And rather than making it so slow, let's speed that up again. Yeah, that sounds about right. Cool. So we go back to our code. In the show game over, rather than stopping the sound on channel 1, what we can do is we can just tell it to play sound effect 2. Yep, sound effect 2. And play that on channel 0 so that it will stop the motorbike drone noise. So give that a try. And we crash. Awesome. Let's save that. Always save your work. Alright. Cool. Alright, so the next thing we probably need to do is make the title screen a little bit more interesting than just press Z to start. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a giant logo saying light cycles, and what we're going to do there is we're going to go to the sprite editor the sprite editor, and we've got this current thing which lets us edit a particular size, but what you can also do is increase the size of that editing area or editing window area. And if we then grab, say, a blue, we can also increase the size of that, and you'll see this is roughly the 128, the screen width there, broken up into half to 64 pixels by 64 pixels. So what we can do is we can actually hit this button over there and edit something, and I'm just going to do a very crude, obviously no artist. There we are. Something like that. Yeah. And I'm going to draw that out there. And then what we can do is we go back to the edit there, back to this one, you see that it's split across 2 halves. And what we can now do is in the code for our show menu, in our draw menu, what we can do is we can update this. So what we'll do is we'll probably take this, stick it down here. Cool. And now we can use the sprite command, the SPR command, to actually draw the sprite. Now the sprite command, you basically specify which sprite to draw. So sprite 0 is the top rightmost sprite, and you then normally position to draw the position of the sprite, but there's a version of the command that lets you basically say how many sprites wide and high you want to draw. So effectively it draws the entire block of sprites starting at that position. So if we just do something like this, we should now, when we run, get that over there. Cool. Alrighty. And then we can the game. Alright. Okay. Now what we can also do here is add some instructions, I think. So we've got the sprites over there. Let's add the word bikes or bike underneath there. So let's draw B. How many did I put there? Say 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can draw that, somewhere like starting there and maybe somewhere there, and we can choose the color we're going to draw it in. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, something like that. I think we can actually add some other space between each of these. Yeah, it looks a bit better. Okay. And then for some instructions, we can just tell the players which keys to use. So we can say player 1, we use the S and F keys to turn, and we'll draw that at something like here, and we'll make it their color, which is blue, light blue. And then we can say print for player 2, we can say left/right keys. I don't think we're going to say, or to turn, we won't be able to fit that in. 10, 70, and 14 for the color. And then the press Z to start, we will push that right down to the bottom of the screen somewhere, something like that. Let's have a look. All right, so that looks pretty good. And we can do Z to start. All right, and then we crash, and we're back out again. Okay. So let's also pretty up the game over screen. So find the game over screen, and currently we just say game over. It'd probably be nice to tell it which player lost and maybe draw an explosion or something. So what we can do here is we firstly need to know which player died. So what we can go do is right at the top here, for player 1 and player 2, we can say player 1.dead equals false, as in not dead. And this is in the run game, so this will, every time we start the game, we'll set their death flag to false, and we'll do the same thing for this side. Player 2 equals false. And then in our update player, if we've decided that they've crashed into something, so if player 1, if we check the pixel preset for the current player, that X and Y location is not equal to 0, in other words it's not black, then we need to crash it into something. So what we will do, let's just make it a little clearer, is we'll say that player.dead is equal to true, so we can check whether that player is dead, and then we show the game over screens. Alright, and then down at the bottom here we can do some stuff here. So firstly we're going to print game over, push it somewhere better on the screen, 550, yeah, more centered, something like that. And then we're going to say if player 1 dead, then what we want to do is we're going to say print player 2 wins. And we can copy that. And we say if player 2 is dead, then we want to say player 1 has won. And we should probably also say something about pressing the Z key to continue. So press Z to continue. And once again, put that somewhere at the bottom of the screen. screen, something like that. All right, let's have a look what that looks like. Game over, player 2 wins, yes, because player 1 crashed. Try that again. And player 2 won. Oh, that was a bit close to 2 who actually crashed there. Let's try that again. Okay, player 2 wins. And player 1 wins. Excellent. All right. Now it's not completely obvious who died there, so I think we need to kind of add some kind of explosion animation or something like that. So what we're going to do is at the top here, we're just going to create a little variable. We're going to call it animation step or something like that. We're going to set it equal to 0. And what we want to do is we want to draw a circle where the player died. So what we're going to do, oops, not that, we're going to use the circfill command. We're going to do for player 1.x and player 1.y. And then we're going to do the radius, and we want to do is like animate it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to say anim step. And we don't want it to be too big, so we're going to divide that by 5. And then we are also going to draw it in a color in tune with anim. And that will actually give us a little flashing effect as we cycle through or increment the value for, oops, rather not anim, but anim step. As we increment animation step. And if it's player 2 that's dead, we're going to draw the circle at player 2's location, the size and the step. And then lastly, we're going to add a bit of logic here to anim step is equal to anim step plus 1. So just count it up. And because we only have 16 colors, we're going to say if anim step is greater than 16, then anim step is equal to 0, which will be black. And we're in that. And so it just cycles around through all the colors. And because we're doing 40 frames a second in the draw, it should kind of give this flashing effect. So if we run that, we see to start crash into something, we kind of line up with that cool explosionally flashing effect. Awesome. Cool. All right. And I think that will do. What I'm going to do now is I'll just pause the video and I will go through and clean up some of these horrendous graphics, and then when I come back I will show you the final game. Be right back. Okay, so I've done a little bit of tweaking to the graphics so that things now look like this. Give it a bit of a more of a sexier sci-fi Tron-like font, and the game plays as before. Alright, so the last thing to do is to save this as a cart that we can upload to the PICO-8 website. So the first thing we want to do is press F7, which will capture a screenshot for us. The other thing we can put it there at the top there is some comments, so we can say something like light bikes, copyright Rabbit Gremlin 2015. All right, and now when we save, we can save it as bikes.png, which would effectively then save the file as well as the settings into where the cart file is stored, which I will find for you shortly. So the carts are stored in your user directory. So under app data roaming, and you'll find a PICO-8 and there's carts, and you will see now there is the bikes.png, which if we double click on, we'll have our little screenshot there and our little text there. And actually this PNG file also contains the source code, so we can now upload that to the PICO-8 website, and I'll put a link in the notes of the video clip. And that is it. That is our little light bikes game created in PICO-8.